It was supposed to be just another winter storm. But then a single knock on the door and changed everything. If stories of second chances, quiet courage, and unexpected family speak to your heart, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to the channel. You won't want to miss what happens next. The wind came in from the sea like it had something to prove. Cold, biting, full of salt and warning. The sky above Windham Hill was the color of ash, and the waves below struck the rocky shore like fists. Lucas Miller stood at the edge of the bluff, his old parka zipped up to his chin, flashlight cutting through the dark. He hadn't meant to be out this late, but after the storm rolled through, he'd come down to check the boat moored in the small cove. The lines held. The hull was sound. Everything else could wait. He was halfway back up the trail when he heard it. A sound, faint, desperate, carried by the wind. Not a gull. Not the groan of tree limbs. Something human. Lucas stopped. He turned back toward the sea. The beam of his flashlight danced across the jagged rocks and the swirling foam below. Then he saw her, just beyond the surf, tangled in seaweed and shards of moonlight. A body floated, barely moving. For a moment he thought she might already be gone. Then she coughed. Lucas dropped the light and ran, boots skidding down the muddy slope. The rocks were slick, the salt air sharp in his throat. He splashed into the water without thinking. Cold, slicing through his jeans like knives. She was half conscious when he reached her. Her coat, thin and soaked, hung off her like a second skin. Her arms clung to her belly. She was pregnant. "Hey," he said, breathless. "I've got you. You're okay now." She didn't answer. Her lips were blue, her eyes fluttered. Lucas lifted her, cradling her carefully as he navigated back up the rocks, legs straining with effort. The trail back to the house had never felt so steep. He didn't stop. Couldn't. Not when her pulse was so faint. Not when her head lolled against his chest like a child's. By the time he kicked open the front door of the cabin, the fire had gone cold. He laid her on the old leather couch and grabbed every blanket he could find. One of Finn's, his son's, wool throws, the flannel quilt from the guest bed, even the tattered brown Afghan Ellen had made before. He shook the thought off. She was still shivering beneath the layers. Her fingers clutched her stomach as if it were the only thing tethering her to life. Lucas crouched beside her, brushing wet hair from her face. She was young, maybe early 30s, her features delicate but tight with pain. A bruise was already blooming across her temple. "What the hell happened to you?" He didn't expect an answer. She gave him none. He moved quickly, lighting the fire, warming water, setting a kettle on the stove. The kitchen filled with the scent of cedar smoke and the faint sweetness of cinnamon from an old tea tin. He poured a mug, added honey, and returned to the living room. She was awake now, barely. Her eyes followed him but didn't speak. "Here," he said softly, kneeling again. "Warm your hands first." She tried. They trembled too hard to hold. The mug. Lucas took her fingers gently, wrapped them around the ceramic, held them there. "You don't have to say anything. Just stay awake." Still nothing. But her breath grew steadier. Her eyes stayed open. Upstairs, Finn slept on, unaware. The house creaked under the weight of winter wind, but inside, it was warmer now. Not just from the fire. Lucas didn't ask her name, not yet. He brought her a dry blanket, helped her out of the soaked coat. He caught a glimpse of her side, scratches, bruises, a red welt across her ribcage. She pulled the blanket tighter without a word. He didn't press. Instead, he sat across from her in the old rocker, sipping his tea, watching the flames climb higher in the hearth. The fire crackled, casting gold and shadow across the room, flickering. Against the weathered pine walls, the framed photo of Ellen and Finn still perched on the mantel. Minutes passed, or maybe an hour. Time felt different now. She spoke first, barely a whisper. "Thank you." Lucas looked up. Her eyes met his. Not gratitude, not exactly. Something closer to surrender. Or maybe defiance that had run out of places to hide. "You're safe," he said. "That's all that matters." She gave a small, tired nod. Lucas didn't ask the questions burning in his mind. Who had hurt her? Why had she been in the water? How far along was she? Why the bruises, the silence? Those answers could wait. For now, she was here, and breathing, and not alone. He stood, turned down the hallway light, and pulled the quilt tighter around her shoulders. Then, as he started up the stairs toward his room, her voice stopped him again. "I didn't fall," she said. Her voice was low, almost lost in the crackle of the fire. "He pushed me." Lucas turned, but she had already closed her eyes. He stood there a moment, every instinct inside him pulling in different directions. Anger, pity, fear, but mostly something else. Something he hadn't felt in a long, long time. Responsibility. He looked around the living room. Old wood, soft firelight, the familiar hush of home, and realized it had changed the moment she stepped inside. He didn't know her name, but he knew this. The silence in the house had ended tonight, and nothing would ever be quite the same again. The next morning came slow, draped in fog and the quiet hum of winter. Snow clung to the corners of the windows, blurring the view of the pines beyond. Inside, the cabin breathed a hesitant warmth, the kind that lives between silence and memory. Lucas stood at the stove, the old kettle just beginning to sing. His hands moved on instinct, coffee grounds, toast in the skillet, butter softening in a dish. Across the room, the woman was still asleep on the couch, her body curled beneath the same quilt Ellen had stitched from old flannel shirts years ago. Her breathing was steady now. The bruises on her face looked harsher in the pale morning light. Didn't know her name, but her voice from the night before still rang in his head. "He pushed me." Lucas swallowed hard and poured himself a cup of coffee. He didn't sit. His body was restless, unsettled. It had been a long time since anyone but Finn had slept under this roof. A longer time still since someone had needed him for more than a scraped knee or a jar that wouldn't open. The floor above creaked, followed by the light thump of small feet. Moments later, Finn padded into the kitchen, hair messy, one sock half off. "Dad?" he asked, rubbing his eyes. "Who's that?" Lucas turned toward the couch. The woman hadn't stirred. "She's someone who needed help," he said simply. Finn blinked. "Is she okay?" "She will be." That seemed enough for now. Finn yawned and climbed onto the stool by the counter, reaching for a slice of toast. Lucas poured him juice, set it down, then glanced toward the living room again. She hadn't moved. He lowered his voice. "Hey, bud, why don't you go get dressed in your room? I'll help her get settled upstairs." Finn nodded, already distracted by the toast. He wandered off, leaving Lucas in the hush of the kitchen, coffee cooling in his hands. She woke as he approached, eyes open, cautious but clearer than the night before. "I made coffee," he said, gentle. "And toast." Her voice came rough. "You don't have to. I know," he replied. "But I did." She sat up slowly, wincing as she moved. Her hand instinctively touched her belly. She was farther along than he'd guessed, 7 months, maybe more. Lucas crouched beside the couch, not too close. "There's a room upstairs. It's warmer than the couch. You're welcome to it." She hesitated. "I won't ask anything," he added. "You don't have to talk. You can leave when you're ready. But you need a real bed. A door you can close." Her eyes flicked toward the stairs. Then, after a long pause, she nodded. Lucas stood, offering a hand. She didn't take it, but she rose slowly, shaky but upright. He walked a step ahead, not looking back, leading her to the stairs and up the narrow hallway, the second door on the right. He stopped there, fingers resting on the doorknob. The wood was scratched, the paint faded. Dust still clung to the hinges. He hadn't opened it in 5 years, but today, the lock gave with a soft click. He pushed the door open. The room was small, square, with light blue walls and a slanted ceiling. The window faced the pines, now glazed with frost. A double bed sat in the corner, neatly made despite the years. The quilt on top was handmade, Ellen's again, stitched with stars and half-faded colors. A rocking chair stood near the wall, still and silent. Lucas stepped aside. "You can rest here. Take your time." She entered quietly, as if afraid the floor might reject her weight. Her eyes moved across the room, pausing on the quilt, the chair, the soft light slanting through lace curtains. "This was her room," she said. Lucas stilled. "Yeah." A long silence stretched. "Are you sure you want me in here?" He met her eyes. "It's just a room," he said. "She's not in it anymore." That wasn't entirely true, but it felt right to say. She nodded, then turned toward the bed. She didn't lie down. Not yet. She stood for a long time, one hand on her belly, the other trailing across the quilt's edge. Lucas stepped back, giving her space. "I'll be downstairs," he said. Just before he closed the door, she spoke again, so quiet he almost missed it. "Thank you." He paused, hand on the frame. "You're welcome," he said, then shut the door with the gentlest click. Downstairs, Finn was dressed now, coat half-zipped, his sketchpad under one arm. "Where'd she go?" he asked. Lucas poured fresh coffee. "She's resting." "Is she staying?" Lucas didn't answer, right away. For a while. Finn scribbled something with a red crayon, then held it up. A stick figure with messy hair. A round belly. A small heart floating beside her. Lucas blinked. "She looks nice," Finn said. "Even if she's tired." Lucas nodded. He didn't say it, but he was tired too. Tired in the way men get when they've carried silence too long. When grief turns into furniture, always there, quietly gathering dust. He glanced toward the stairs. Up there, in the room that had once held his forever, someone else had begun to breathe again. And somehow, so had he. The snow didn't stop for 2 more days. It fell in soft waves, blanketing the cabin, muting the forest beyond, erasing roads and noise and everything unnecessary. The world shrank to a few quiet rooms and the sound of wood crackling in the stove. Lucas didn't mind. The rhythm of their days took shape without plan or effort. He woke first, fed the fire, made coffee. Finn followed, always half-dressed and smiling, hungry for toast and conversation. And somewhere after that, always quiet, always careful, came her. She never stayed downstairs long, just enough to sip tea or eat a few bites of something warm. She would fold her hands in her lap, listen to Finn's stories, then retreat back upstairs before anyone asked too much. Lucas didn't try to stop her. He remembered how long it took to speak again after Ellen died. How words felt like betrayal, when grief was still fresh. But still he noticed her, how she touched her belly with both hands whenever Finn sat close. How she looked out the frost-laced window like it might open a way back to something she'd lost. How she flinched, barely, every time the floor creaked behind her. Lucas didn't know her name. He didn't need to. Not yet. That night, after Finn went to bed, Lucas sat in the old rocking chair by the fire. The house had grown quiet, save for the distant moan of wind along the eaves. A book rested open in his lap, unread. Then he heard the creak of the stair. He looked up. She stood, at the edge of the hallway, wrapped in a blanket. Her hair was pulled back in a messy knot. She looked smaller in the dark, unsure, almost ghost-like. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked softly. She shook her head. He nodded toward the chair across from him. "You're welcome to sit." She hesitated, then moved toward it, sat. The blanket fell around her shoulders like armor. For a long moment they didn't speak. Just the fire between them, warm and steady. Then, in a voice that barely rose above the whisper of flames, she said, "Claire." Lucas turned slightly. "What?" "My name," she said, eyes on the hearth. "It's Claire." He said it once, softly. "Claire." She nodded almost imperceptibly. Lucas folded his hands. I'm Lucas. I figured, she said, a hint of dry humor flickering through. Your kid says it about 20 times an hour. Lucas chuckled under his breath. Yeah, he doesn't really do subtle. Claire looked toward the stairs. He's sweet. He's good, Lucas said, then added more carefully. He's been through a lot, too. She didn't ask what. He didn't offer. The silence between them was kind, not cold. I'm sorry about your wife, she said after a moment. Lucas didn't flinch. He only nodded. 5 years. Claire didn't say that's not so long. She didn't say she's in a better place. She just looked at him like she knew what grief could do to a man. I didn't mean to stay, she said softly. I thought I'd just make it to the shore, maybe walk, find help. Lucas didn't say what they both knew, that in her condition in this weather she wouldn't have made it another mile. He studied her face in the firelight. The bruise on her temple had darkened, but her eyes looked clearer tonight. Less afraid. Did you ever mean to keep it? He asked gently, eyes flicking to her belly. Claire nodded. From the start. It was never a question, just not the answer he wanted. Lucas waited. She turned slightly, fingers curling around the edge of the blanket. He told me I was ruining his legacy, that no one would believe it was his choice. So he made a different choice. For both of us. The words hung there, bitter and sharp. Lucas felt something old rise in his chest, a kind of anger he hadn't touched in years, the quiet pulsing rage of good people being treated like collateral. You didn't deserve that, he said, voice low. Claire blinked once, slowly. Then, quietly, thank you. The fire crackled between them. After a while, Claire leaned back in the chair, resting one hand over her stomach. It kicks more at night, she said, a note of wonder in her voice. Like it knows the world's asleep and it can stretch. Lucas smiled, eyes softening. Finn used to do that too. Always waited until Ellen finally dozed off, then started doing backflips. Claire laughed, a soft round sound that felt like the first real breeze in spring. It startled her a little. Startled Lucas too. They sat there a while longer, not as strangers now, not quite. When she stood to return upstairs, Lucas didn't move, but as she reached the stairwell, she turned. You can call me Claire, she said. Lucas looked up. I will. Then she was gone. And in her place, something else had settled. Not comfort, not yet, but presence. The living kind. The following days unfolded like pages from a slow, handwritten letter, careful, unhurried, full of pauses. The snow had eased, though it still clung to the roof like a blanket the house couldn't quite shake. Off. Claire had started coming downstairs earlier now, usually wrapped in one of Ellen's old cardigans Lucas had offered without ceremony. She moved slowly, her hands often cupping the weight of her belly, like she was guarding something sacred. Or fragile, or both. Lucas never asked her questions. She noticed that most men, in her experience, either pushed or pretended. He did neither. He made space. On the third morning, Claire stood in the kitchen holding a chipped mug of lukewarm tea. Finn had left for school with his backpack dragging in the snow, and a kiss smacked against Lucas's flannel-covered shoulder. The house felt quieter with him gone, less bright but more open. Claire ran her thumb along the rim of the mug. My mother used to drink lemon tea, she said, not quite looking at him. Lucas, across the room, paused with the firewood he was stacking beside the stove. Yeah? Every night, even in summer. Said it helped her sleep. Claire sat at the kitchen table, her voice softer now. She died when I was 17, pancreatic cancer, the kind that doesn't knock, just breaks the door down. Lucas lowered himself into the chair across from her, silent. Claire stared out the window where the trees trembled slightly in the wind. After she was gone, my dad got quieter, not mean, just absent. I'd sit in the same room with him and feel 1,000 miles away. Lucas understood that kind of silence, the kind that wraps around grief and turns it into armor. I went to college, she continued, on a scholarship, studied business, wanted to make something of myself. I thought, if I climbed high enough, built something big enough, it might make up for what I lost. Lucas studied her carefully. She wasn't just telling him a story. She was walking through it again barefoot. And did it? He asked gently. Claire gave a small laugh, sharp around the edges. I got a job at a venture firm, high floors, glass walls. Everyone wore ambition like perfume. I was good at it, good at smiling, good at not needing anything. She fell quiet for a moment. Then her voice cracked just enough to show the truth beneath it. That's where I met him. Lucas didn't ask his name, didn't need to. Claire traced the edge of the table with her fingertip. He was older, polished. Everyone listened when he spoke, including me. He said I was different, said I was better than the girls who just wanted his money. She paused. Turned out, he was better at lying than I was at believing. Lucas leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I got pregnant, Claire said. And suddenly I wasn't impressive anymore, I was a liability. She looked up at him then, her eyes dark and glassy. I tried to tell him I didn't want anything from him, just space, safety, a chance to do this on my own. Her voice shook. But he didn't believe me. Or maybe he did. Maybe that's what scared him. Lucas could see it all. The coldness, the gaslighting, the way power twisted love into control. He'd seen it before, just never this close. He invited me on the yacht, Claire said. Said we needed closure, said he wanted to understand. She laughed once, humorless. He waited until we were far enough out. Then he said I had two choices: disappear quietly or be dealt with. Lucas's hands clenched around the armrest. I didn't choose either, Claire said. He did? The kitchen felt too small for what she had just said. Too warm, too safe for the violence her words carried. Lucas's voice, when it came, was rough around the edges. Claire, but she shook her head. I don't want pity. That's not why I'm telling you. Then why? He asked. She looked at him. Really looked. And for the first time, he saw not just fear or weariness, but shame. Because I didn't get to tell my mother. Lucas waited. I didn't get to tell her I was strong. That I survived something ugly without becoming it. I didn't get to tell her that I'm trying to do better than what happened to me. Her words hung in the air like unfinished prayers. Lucas stood slowly, moved around the table, and then, without asking, he pulled out the chair beside her and sat. He didn't touch her, but he was close enough for her to feel that she wasn't alone. I think, he said quietly, your mother would be proud of you. Claire's breath caught. Her fingers gripped the mug tighter. I think, he added, she'd be damn proud. Tears welled in her eyes. She didn't blink them away this time. She let them fall, slow and silent, like the first drops of rain on dry ground. For a long while they sat like that. No more words. No need for them. When Claire finally stood, her shoulders looked lighter. Before she left the room, she turned back to Lucas. I don't talk like that to most people. I'm not most people, he said, and meant it. She gave the smallest nod, and then, for the first time since she arrived, Claire climbed the stairs without looking back. Lucas sat alone in the kitchen, the firelight flickering against the walls, and thought, maybe silence isn't always empty. Sometimes it's just waiting for the right words to come home. By the second week, the cabin had a rhythm again. Mornings started with the whistle of the kettle and the soft clatter of Finn's footsteps descending the stairs, always two at a time. Lucas would already be up, slicing bread or stoking the fire, the sleeves of his flannel rolled to the elbows. Claire came down later, quiet but steadier now. Her belly leading the way, hands curved around it like parentheses holding her in place. The air in the house smelled different lately, less like dust and old grief, more like cinnamon and wood smoke. Lucas couldn't say exactly when the shift happened. Maybe it was the morning he found Claire humming absent-mindedly while drying dishes, or the way Finn started saving her the last pancake, even though he claimed he never shared food with grown-ups. Maybe it was just the sound of her laughter. Still, rare, still soft, echoing once across the kitchen like it belonged. Whatever it was, something was changing, and Lucas felt it deep in his bones. On Saturday, the snow finally gave them a break. Lucas took Finn into town for groceries, leaving Claire with instructions for the heater and a half-joking warning about the raccoon that sometimes tried to sneak in through the vent. "You're not funny," she'd said with a smirk. "You're just not from here," he'd replied. When they returned, the house smelled like cinnamon rolls. Lucas blinked at the scene. Claire standing in the kitchen in one of Ellen's oversized sweaters, hair tied up, flour on her cheek. Finn was on a stool beside her, licking icing off a spoon like it was gold. "You bake," Lucas said, still half in his coat. Claire shrugged. "A little." Finn held up a gooey roll like a trophy. "Dad, she makes better cinnamon stuff than you." Lucas lifted an eyebrow. "That's a bold claim." Claire chuckled. "He helped. Supervised," Finn corrected. Lucas set the bags down and walked to the stove, inhaling. Sweet, warm, nostalgic. He hadn't smelled this particular combination in years, cinnamon and old wood. Claire watched him, something unspoken moving behind her eyes. "You okay?" Lucas nodded slowly. "Yeah, just reminded me." "Of her?" she asked gently. He didn't answer. Didn't need to. She looked away, not out of discomfort, but reverence. Later that evening, they ate dinner around the table. Something Claire had cooked while Lucas chopped firewood, something with rosemary, and potatoes that filled the house with warmth. Finn talked about his science project, something involving vinegar and a plastic bottle, and Claire listened like every word mattered. Lucas found himself watching her more than once. Not just the way she listened, but the way her presence had woven itself into the fabric of the room without trying. After the dishes were washed and Finn was tucked in, his voice sleepy and hopeful as he asked Claire to read just one page of his dinosaur book. They found themselves in the living room, the fire low, snow drifting again outside the windows. Claire sat in the rocker. Lucas sat in the chair Ellen once claimed as hers. It should have felt strange. It didn't. "I haven't stayed in one place this long since I left New York," Claire said. "You miss it?" She tilted her head. "I miss the idea of it. The noise, the anonymity, but not the people, not what it turned me into." Lucas looked at her. "What did it turn you into?" She hesitated. "Someone who forgot how to be still." The fire popped softly. "I think," Lucas said, "you're remembering." Claire looked at the flames, not smiling, but not sad either. "I hope so." They sat in silence for a while, the kind of silence that asked nothing but presence. Then Claire shifted, one hand on her belly. "She's moving." Lucas straightened, slightly. "She?" Claire nodded, eyes soft. "I didn't want to know at first, but when I found out, it felt right." Lucas smiled faintly. "Finn always said he wanted a sister." Claire glanced at him. "You think he'll be okay?" If we stay longer?" Lucas's breath caught, not from surprise, but from the quiet hope wrapped inside her words. "He'd be more than okay," he said. "He'd be lucky." She blinked quickly, looking down. "That's not something I've been called much lately." "You should be," he said. "You're braver than you think." She looked up and something shifted in the air, like a thread being tied gently between two hearts that weren't sure they could still open. "I think this place is getting to me," Claire whispered. Lucas raised an eyebrow. "You say that like it's a bad thing." She laughed softly. "I don't think it is." The fire dimmed, the room grew quieter, but the warmth lingered. Before heading up to bed, Claire paused at the stairs. "I made extra cinnamon rolls," she said. "I wrapped a few, in case you wanted them later." Lucas nodded. Thanks. She looked at him for a long moment, then said, You're good at this. At what? She smiled. Barely. Making people feel safe. He didn't respond. Couldn't, really. But after she'd gone, Lucas sat a long time by the fire, and for the first time in 5 years, he didn't feel like the house was echoing. It felt full. Of what? He didn't know, but he didn't rush to define it. Some things didn't need names right away. Some things just needed time. It was the prints that stopped him. They weren't fresh, just faint enough to blend with the wind-swept snow outside the porch. But Lucas had lived through enough winters on Wyndham Hill to know when something didn't belong. The shape, the pattern, and too long between strides, too deep for a mailman. And definitely not Finn's. He crouched, boots creaking beneath him, and traced one toe of a footprint with a gloved finger. Someone had come up the drive, but not all the way to the door, just close enough to watch. Then left. He stood slowly, eyes sweeping the tree line. The wind moved the pines like sighs. All was still again, but his stomach tightened anyway. It had been over 2 weeks since Claire arrived, half frozen, half swallowed by the sea. Since then, she'd stayed and changed. The house had changed with her, but now something cold had slipped back in. Lucas brushed the snow off his gloves and stepped inside. The scent of wood smoke and ginger lingered. Finn's backpack hung on its usual hook. The kettle clicked off with a soft metallic sigh. Claire sat at the kitchen table with a hand over her belly, a tea bag steeping in front of her. She looked up immediately. What is it? Lucas hesitated. Just thought I saw tracks. Nothing. Close, might have been old. Claire didn't answer, but her hand tightened around the mug. He noticed the way her shoulders curled slightly inward, the way her breath shortened, just a little. He wanted to tell her it was nothing, but he couldn't lie. Not to her. Instead, he poured a second cup of tea and sat down across from her. They didn't speak, but she sipped slowly, like someone learning how to pretend to be calm. It was Finn bounding down the stairs who shattered the silence. I'm ready, he yelled, winter hat askew, scarf dragging behind him like a cape. We're building the fort today, right? Lucas looked at Claire. She nodded, barely. Go on, it's a good day for it. But her voice lacked the lilt it had yesterday. Outside, Finn ran circles in the snow. Lucas shoveled a path toward the back shed while watching the tree line. No movement. But the unease stayed. When he came in hours later, cheeks burning from cold and arms aching, he found Claire standing in the hallway with an envelope in her hand. It had no stamp, no return address, just her name, Claire Monroe, in slanted, confident script. Lucas took one look and felt every cell in his body harden. She didn't open it right away, just held it like it might burn. Then quietly, she walked to the living room and sat down on the edge of the couch. Lucas followed, setting the shovel aside, snow still clinging to his boots. Claire opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed, "You've made your point. Come back quietly, or I'll take what's mine." Claire didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just handed Lucas the note with fingers that trembled. He read it once, then again, and then, without thinking, he tore it in half. Then again, until it was nothing but paper dust. Claire looked up, startled. Lucas met her eyes. "You don't belong to anyone," he said. "Not now, not ever." She blinked, swallowed. But the words didn't break her like he thought they might. Instead, they seemed to steady her. "He found me," she said. Lucas exhaled slowly, sat beside her, hands braced on his knees. "We don't know that. He always finds things he wants." Her voice was hollow. "And if he knows where I am, he knows where she is." Her hand drifted to her belly again. Lucas looked at her, really looked at her, not just the fear, but the quiet resolve underneath it. She had run so far, fought so long, not for herself, but for the child she hadn't even met yet. He reached out, gently, laid a hand over hers. "You're not alone now." The fire crackled. Behind them, snow tapped against the windows. Claire turned to him. "You could get hurt." "Finn," he shook his head. "Let me worry about that." "No, I've already brought enough." "You brought cinnamon rolls and morning laughter," Lucas said, voice firm. "You brought light back into a house that forgot how to hold it. Don't tell me you only brought danger." She stared at him, eyes wet. "You don't even know what he's capable of." "I don't care." Silence fell between them, dense, weighted, but not cold. Finally, Claire leaned forward, her forehead resting against his shoulder, not in weakness, but exhaustion, not in romance, but trust. Lucas didn't move. He just sat there, letting her lean, letting her be. That night, they moved Finn's sleeping bag into Lucas's room and locked every window. The fire burned longer. The lights stayed dim. Lucas kept a tire iron by the door. No one came, but the memory of the envelope hung in the air like smoke. Still, when Claire tucked herself into the guest room, she paused at the doorway. "Thank you," she whispered. Lucas nodded. "I meant it. You're not alone," she offered the smallest smile. "Then I'll try to believe it." When she closed the door behind her, Lucas stayed downstairs a while longer. The flames danced in the hearth. The scent of cinnamon still clung to the air. And somewhere beneath the fear, a new kind of fire was building in his chest. Not rage, not protection, but something harder, something deeper. Conviction. He wasn't just keeping Claire safe. He was choosing her, and whatever storm might come, he wasn't planning to step aside. The knock came just after noon. Firm, deliberate. Not the kind of knock that asked permission, but expected compliance. Lucas was standing at the sink drying his hands on a dish towel when he heard it. Claire was upstairs napping after a rough night of restless kicks and pain in her lower back. Finn was at school. The house for once had been still. Until now. Lucas walked to the front door slowly, opened it and saw him. The man was polished. Dark coat, leather gloves, hair too perfect for the wind that tore at the trees behind him. He smiled like a man who'd never needed to raise his voice to get his way. "Mr. Miller," he said. Lucas didn't answer. "I believe Claire Monroe is staying here." Lucas held the doorframe. The man tilted his head as if amused. "You're a hard man to find. Do you know who I am?" "No," Lucas said. "And I don't care." The man smiled, again, but it didn't reach his eyes. "My name is Elliot Sloan, CEO of Horizon Ventures. Claire and we have a complicated history." Lucas didn't blink. "You pushed her off a yacht." Elliot's smile faded for the first time. "She's carrying my child," he said. Lucas stepped outside, closing the door behind him. "You lost that right the second you tried to erase her," he said calmly. "You don't get to rewrite what happened." "I'm not here to argue," Elliot replied, voice smoothing again. "I'm here to offer her a choice. One I suggest she consider carefully." He reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope, thicker than the last. Lucas didn't take it. Elliot stepped closer. "Look, I don't know what kind of arrangement you've made with her. Maybe it's pity. Maybe you're hoping for something more, but whatever this is, it's temporary. You're a handyman with a shack in the woods. I'm offering her and that child security, legacy, a future." Lucas didn't speak. He just looked at him. Really looked. For all the money in his pockets, Elliot was still just a man terrified of being seen for what he really was. "Go back to your car," Lucas said, voice low. "And if you ever come near this house again, you'll leave with more than a torn coat." Elliot narrowed his eyes. "Is that a threat?" "No," Lucas replied. "It's a promise." The man held his gaze a moment longer. Then, with a disgusted sigh, he tucked the envelope back into his coat and turned toward the black car, waiting at the end of the drive. Lucas didn't move until the tires disappeared into the curve of the snow-covered road. Inside, Claire stood at the top of the stairs, hand gripping the banister. "I heard," she said, her voice flat. Lucas looked up at her, jaw still clenched. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't want him to find me." "He's gone," Lucas said. "For now." Lucas moved to the bottom of the stairs, speaking slowly. "Claire, if you're thinking of leaving because of him—" "I'm not," she said. Silence fell between them, heavy as snow on pine limbs. Then she came down, step by slow step, and stood before him. "I didn't run all this way to give up," she said. "But I am tired of being the reason people have to fight." Lucas reached out. His hand hovered near hers before he touched it, lightly, then firmly. "You're not the reason," he said. "You're the anchor." She looked at him, eyes glassy. "I don't want to be afraid anymore," she whispered. "Then don't be," he said. "I'll carry that for a while. You've done enough." A tear slid down her cheek. She didn't brush it away. Instead, she stepped forward and laid her head against his chest, not seeking comfort but offering it. Lucas closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, let someone rest there. That night, the three of them sat on the floor by the fire, the couch left empty. Finn was building a fort from cushions and blankets, humming to himself. Claire watched him with a small smile. Lucas sipped coffee, knees pulled to his chest, warmth soaking into his bones. Finn looked up suddenly. "Is the baby going to live here when she's born?" Lucas glanced at Claire. Claire paused, then nodded. "If that's okay with you." Finn beamed. "It's more than okay. I can teach her dinosaur names." Claire laughed. Lucas did too. Later, after Finn was tucked in and the fire burned low, Claire stood at the window, watching the shadows outside. Lucas approached her carefully. "He won't come back tonight," he said. She didn't respond right away. Then softly, "Do you think some people just don't know how to love?" Lucas considered the question. "I think some people confuse control for love," he said. "And when they lose control, they think they've lost everything." Claire nodded slowly. "I want to give her something different," she whispered. "Something safe, something that doesn't disappear when things get hard." Lucas stepped beside her, his voice rough. "You already are." She turned to him, eyes shining in the firelight. "You mean that?" "I do." Claire exhaled slowly, and then, without ceremony, without a word, she reached for his hand. Lucas let her take it, held it like it meant something, because it did. It meant everything. It started with the smell. Lucas woke before dawn. The air in the room wrong. Too sharp. Too dry. A faint scent of something acrid drifted in through the crack beneath his bedroom door. He was on his feet before his mind caught up. Down the hall, Finn stirred. Claire's door was still shut. Then came the sound. A subtle pop from downstairs, followed by a low hiss that didn't belong to the wind. Lucas opened the bedroom door and the smell hit him full. Smoke. Thick and sour and spreading fast. He ran. The staircase glowed dim with orange light. By the time he reached the bottom, the flames were already licking the edges of the kitchen wall. Smoke billowed along the ceiling, clawing its way through the beams. The fire crackled. Not wild yet, but alive. "Claire!" he shouted, voice hoarse. A second later, she burst from the hallway in a flannel robe, eyes wide, barefoot. "The baby!" "Upstairs!" he barked. "Get Finn! I've got water!" She didn't argue, just turned and ran. Lucas darted to the sink, yanked open the cabinet. Buckets. A basin. His hands were shaking, brain moving faster than his breath. He soaked 2 towels, threw one over his face, and charged the fire. It was worse than he thought. The kitchen curtains had caught, feeding the flames. Cabinets blackened and cracked. The smoke curled like fingers up the walls, clawing higher, hungrier. He threw water, heard the hiss, threw again, but it was too late. The fire wasn't going out, it was taking the house. By the time the fire crew arrived from town, the east side of the cabin was gone. Charred timber cracked under snow-soaked ash. Smoke rose in columns, thick against the dawn. Neighbors gathered, silently along the drive, bundled in coats in disbelief. Lucas stood by the tree line, jacket over Claire's shoulders, Finn held tightly in her arms. Her belly pressed forward, rising with each breath like the weight of it had doubled overnight. He watched the house, what was left of it, and felt something cave in his chest. Not just wood, not just memories, but the sense of safety he'd rebuilt. One quiet morning at a time. It was gone, but he wasn't crying. He couldn't. Claire reached for his hand, trembling. "Lucas," she whispered, voice barely there. "I'm so—" "No," he said firmly. "Don't." She looked at him, eyes shining with guilt and smoke and fear. "This happened because of me." He turned to her then, really turned, put his hands on her shoulders, steady and grounding. "This happened because someone else didn't know how to let go. That's not your fault. But your house was just walls," he said. "You and Finn, that's home." Claire closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, something inside had shifted. Not healed, but cracked enough to let something warmer in. The fire chief came over later, his voice quiet and respectful. "Looks like it started on the porch," he said. "Accelerant used. We're investigating, but you should be prepared." Lucas nodded. "Thanks, Henry. We'll find who did it." "I know," Lucas said, but he wasn't sure justice could reach far enough. The chief hesitated, then lowered his voice. "You've got a lot of people behind you, Lucas. Just say the word." Lucas nodded again. He didn't say the word. Not yet. That afternoon, Claire sat on a borrowed cot in the back room of the firehouse. Her hands rested on her belly, her hair still streaked with ash. Finn lay curled beside her, exhausted but safe. Lucas brought her soup. She didn't touch it. "I don't know how to fix this," she whispered. He sat beside her, not touching, just near. "You don't have to fix anything," he said. "You just have to stay." Claire blinked. "After all this?" "Why?" He looked at her then, really looked, and gave the only answer that mattered. "Because if I lost you too, I don't know what's left of me." She stared at him. Her lips parted like she wanted to speak, but no words came. So she leaned forward, forehead to his chest, and let herself fall apart quietly, not in shame but in trust. That evening, as dusk painted the sky with cold violet light, the three of them returned to the smoking shell of the cabin, not to sift, not yet, but to look, to say goodbye. The pine trees still stood. The stone steps were blackened but solid. The porch swing was gone. Claire stared at the ashes, her eyes wet. "I was just beginning to believe this could be mine," she whispered. Lucas reached down, picked up a scorched piece of wood, held it between his fingers. "It still can." She turned to him. He nodded toward the earth beside the porch. "That's where Ellen and I were going to plant a tree. Never did." Claire followed his gaze. "Maybe it's time." "Maybe it is," he said. He looked at her then, voice steady. "If you'll still stay." She didn't answer with words. She reached down, took his soot-stained hand in hers, held it like roots in new soil. And for the first time all day, Lucas exhaled, not in surrender, but in hope. It started with nails, not the kind that come in boxes, but the kind that show up in coat pockets, loose, forgotten, handed off with a grunt and a nod. The kind old men keep in coffee tins in their sheds, never knowing why they saved them until someone needs to start over. On the second morning after the fire, a pickup truck pulled into the clearing, where the cabin used to stand. It was Pete Waverly, retired carpenter, slow-moving, sharper than he let on. He stepped down, leaned against the tailgate, and looked at Lucas. "Still got your hammer?" he asked. Lucas blinked. "Somewhere." "Find it," Pete said. "We're not building a palace, just something with walls that keep the wind out." Then he hauled a bundle of reclaimed lumber from the truck and got to work. That afternoon, another car came, then 2 more, then a dozen. By sunset, there were folding tables set up with thermoses of coffee and paper plates stacked beside pots of chili. Kids ran around the field where the garden used to be. Claire stood watching from under a borrowed coat, her face half in awe, half in disbelief. Lucas didn't speak much, but his eyes never stopped moving. He saw Evelyn from the bakery, wiping down counters she didn't bring, saw Sheriff Tom hauling plywood without uniform or question, saw 3 teens from the high school putting up a temporary tarp, joking and hammering as if this was just another Saturday. But mostly he saw something else. No one asked what happened. No, one asked if it was her fault. They just showed up, with tools, with casseroles, with silence that didn't judge. Because in Windham Hill, the worst thing you could do wasn't fall apart. It was pretend you didn't need help. Claire tried to help, but her body had other plans. On the 3rd day, while handing out bowls of stew, she winced and braced herself against a folding chair. Lucas rushed over. "You okay?" She nodded. "Just a Braxton Hicks, I think. But it's getting closer." He steadied her elbow. "You should be off your feet." "I can't. Just sit," she whispered. "I have to do something." Lucas looked around. The crew was building a new frame on the old foundation. Boards rose like ribs from the earth. The fire hadn't taken the ground, only what once stood on it. He turned back to her. "You already did something." "What?" "You came back," he said. "You stayed." Claire's eyes filled, but she didn't let the tears fall. "Not here. Not yet." He led her to a bench under the big pine, wrapped her in a quilt, and left, a thermos in her lap. She sat there for hours, belly rising and falling, watching the town rebuild not just for her, but with her. That evening, the frame was up. It wasn't perfect. The lines were crooked, the wood mismatched. But it stood. Finn climbed onto the porch slab and turned to the group. "Is this where the tree goes?" he asked. Everyone quieted. Claire, from the bench, nodded. "Yes, sweetheart." Lucas stepped forward, holding a sapling. It was a maple, small but strong, roots wrapped in burlap. "Promise tree," Finn declared like a foreman announcing the final touch. Claire laughed softly. Lucas planted it with care, hands in soil, palms steady. His chest rose and fell with something that felt a lot like peace. And as the sun slipped behind the hills, golden light spread across the field, casting long shadows from the half-built walls and one hopeful tree. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. She stood by the borrowed cot in the community hall, hands on her back, belly low and heavy. Lucas stirred beside the heater. "Contraction?" She nodded. "They're coming stronger now, closer together." He stood, already reaching for his boots. "Hospital's too far," she said. "It's time." Lucas froze. "You're sure?" Claire met his gaze. "I'm sure." He didn't hesitate. Called Sheriff Tom, who called the town nurse. Evelyn showed up with blankets and boiled water before he even asked. They turned the back room of the firehouse into a cradle of effort and breath and faith. Hours passed in quiet urgency. Finn slept curled in the hallway, a drawing of the new house in his hand. Claire gripped Lucas's arm through every contraction. Her voice never rose above a cry, but her strength, Lord, her strength, tore him in two. And then, suddenly, impossibly, there was a cry louder than all the pain. A new voice, tiny, fierce, alive. A baby girl. Lucas held her first. He stared down into a face so small it didn't seem real, and something inside him cracked open wide enough to let everything he'd buried come through. He handed her to Claire. She laughed and sobbed all at once. "She's okay," she whispered. "She's perfect," he replied. And then Claire looked up at him with tired, shining eyes. "Lucas," he knelt beside her. "I want you to name her." He stared at her, stunned. Claire, that's not—" "Yes," she said. "It is." He swallowed hard, then looked down at the child. "Hope," he said. "Her name is Hope." Spring didn't announce itself with fireworks. It came in slow moments, a shift in the light, the thaw of ice near the garden's edge. The first time Lucas opened a window and didn't wince at the cold. 3 weeks had passed since Hope's birth. The town still buzzed with the story of the fire, but something else had taken root in its place. The story of what came after. The story of a woman who stayed, of a child born beneath the roof of a rebuilt frame, of a man who didn't run from love this time. Lucas sat on the new porch, boots crossed at the ankle, Hope asleep on his chest. She weighed barely 7 pounds, but carried more in her than most men did their whole lives. Inside, Finn helped Claire bake muffins. Not because he liked muffins, but because he liked watching her smile when he cracked the eggs without making a mess. The house still smelled of new pine and fresh paint, but the scent was already fading into something better. Something lived in. Something theirs. The maple tree swayed softly in the breeze near the porch. It had taken to the soil like it had been waiting all along. Finn had tied a ribbon to one of its thin branches, bright red and fluttering. Beneath it, they'd buried a box, a cinnamon stick, a folded note Claire had written for Hope, and the smallest of Hope's first blankets. A time capsule of healing. A promise in the dirt. Lucas looked down at the child curled against him. She stirred, made a sound somewhere, between a hiccup and a yawn, then settled again. Her cheek rested against the beat of his heart like she'd always known it was hers. He still couldn't quite believe it. How everything had unraveled, and somehow rewoven. How he'd gone from watching the snow fall alone, to watching this small life breathe against his chest. How home had become a we again. Claire appeared at the door, brushing flour from her hands. "She finally give in?" she whispered. Lucas nodded. Out like a light. Claire stepped onto the porch and sat beside him, careful not to wake the baby. The late afternoon sun cast a honey glow across her face. Her hair was pulled back, freckles rising after a winter spent in shadows. "You look tired," he said, gently. "I feel it. But good," she smiled. "The best kind of tired." They sat in comfortable silence, the breeze rustling the birch leaves nearby, the soft hum of life wrapping around them like a blanket. "Do you ever think about how none of this was planned?" she asked. Lucas gave a small laugh. "Every day. I mean, look at this. The house, the baby, the tree. It all started with a wave and a storm and a man who didn't ask questions. I asked one," he said, glancing at her. She raised a brow. "Which one? Are you okay?" Claire's face softened. She reached for his hand. "You were the only one who did." Lucas squeezed her fingers gently. "I wasn't looking for this," he admitted. "I know. I didn't think I had room for anything else." Claire looked down at Hope. "But you made room." He nodded slowly. "No. You made me want to." She looked at him, and in her eyes was everything unspoken. Gratitude, forgiveness, the ache of starting over, and the quiet courage it took to stay. Claire leaned her head against his shoulder, just as she had that night after the fire, when everything had burned but not everything had been lost. "I think I was always looking for a place to land," she whispered. Lucas looked toward the tree, its roots stretching down into the same ground that had once held ash. "I think you were always meant to land here." She turned her face toward him, her voice trembling in that way that comes from fullness, not fear. "I don't need a forever promise," she said. "Just someone who wakes up and still chooses us, every morning." Lucas looked at her, held her gaze, and answered not with words but with presence, the kind that stays. That night, Finn tucked a letter into the box beneath the tree. Claire watched from the porch as he patted the soil back down with both hands. "What did you write?" she asked. He shrugged. "Just stuff." Then he looked up at her. "I told her we're lucky, that not everyone gets to grow up in a house where people stayed." Claire's throat tightened. She blinked hard. Lucas stood beside her, a hand resting lightly at the small of her back. Finn ran inside for hot chocolate and the two of them stayed on the porch, the glow from the kitchen spilling out behind them, the stars beginning to gather above. Claire looked at the tree, its branches thin but reaching. "We'll have to water it through the summer," she said. "We will, even when we're tired, especially then." They stood quietly, letting the stillness settle, letting the promise root deeper. The next morning, Lucas found a new letter sitting on the mantel beside the wooden box. Claire's handwriting. He didn't open it yet. Not because he was afraid, but because he already knew what it said. Hope's breathing filled the nursery. Finn's laughter echoed from the kitchen, and outside, the tree swayed in the wind like it was nodding to the world. This was not the life he had planned, but it was the life that stayed. The kind you build with both hands, the kind that grows, the kind you choose, day after day, together. If this story stirred something in you, a memory, a hope, a quiet wish for home, consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Sometimes the stories we choose to stay with are the ones that stay with us.